G'day folks, Peter here. Welcome back to Mondays Down Under on the Talking Pools podcast, where not only am I joined today by Lee and Shane, but a very special guest. Spiros, how are you, sir?
Good to be here, Peter, Shane and Lee.
How you guys doing?
It's great to have you with us. Good. So Spiros joins us from SPASA, the Swimming Pool and Spa Association of Australia, and he is, I can't say enough nice words about Spiros. He has done so much for our industry. He has just been remarkable to bring about so much change, and he is on a lot of he represents us on a lot of advocacies through different government levels and channels. But today he joins us to talk about some changes that are happening to 1926.1, which obviously is relevant to all of our listeners out there. So, Spiros, can you tell us what are the changes that are happening?
Well, thanks, Lee. Before I just jump onto that, firstly, we do a lot of advocacy and standards and representation advocacy work, not only in Australia but certainly in New Zealand. As we speak, we are meeting with Standards New Zealand for the review of the fiberglass manufacturing and fiberglass installation standards. That's taken us some time, but we're glad that we have now developed a process with Standards New Zealand to recognise our industry and emerging technologies. So that's exciting for New Zealand, and we work with New Zealand regulators and authorities in the same way we do in Australia, to ensure that industry has a voice, is recognised, and where possible, protected from red tape, over-regulation and best practice. In relation to the full barrier standard, there are multiple versions over decades that have one principal aim in mind, and that is to reduce children drowning, 0 to 5 drowning in swimming pools, which no one wants to see for obvious reasons. The current standard in Australia is the 2012 version. I was around for that reiteration, and it's served us well up to this point. As part of SPASA's commitment to protect industry and innovate, sometimes we need to lead from the front. And what that means is that we have to sometimes spearhead standards or other regulatory activities before others do, to show, firstly, leadership. And of course, if we're going to be the voice, the peak industry body that leads from the front, we've got to do things before most people get an opportunity to do it. So we've got the 2012 standard, and in 2017, there was a project proposal put through by Standards Australia to review the standard at that time. The revision in 2017 was ultimately cancelled in 2019 after SPASA chose not to support the version that ultimately ended up in the public comment phase. Just because we were the advocates and the project proposal proponents doesn't mean we like the outcome. And so as an industry body, we did a roadshow at that time right across the country in 2019, and SPASA was successful at raising 3,100 comments from industry, and it represented the largest number of comments by any sector for any Australian standards in the history of Standards Australia.
Wow.
This highlights the power of the voice of industry. It highlights the ability for us to move mountains as a unified industry. And ultimately, as a consequence of those 3,100 discussions or comments, the standard was ultimately cancelled. It's something that we informed Standards Australia would happen. It's something that we foresaw and we were committed to. We did not feel it represented our industry well. We don't think it protected children 0 to 5 any better, and it certainly would have decimated our industry. And so it was cancelled. And another project proposal was put through by SPASA again, leading from the front to ensure that we had an opportunity to have a better chance of getting it right next time. And so in 2021, we started a process, a reconstituted committee with a more focus by Standards Australia to ensure that the mistakes of previous years were not replicated. And earlier this year, after years of hard work, the standard was published. The standard, the 2012 standard is still current, and the new standard, the 2024 standard or version of 1926 Part 1, will be adopted in the National Construction Code on the 1st of May, 2025. And our roadshows are there to educate, inform, and provide guidance to not only members, but industry as a whole, alerting them to some of the changes that they should expect, give them the opportunity to ask questions, and for me to properly present what to expect with the existing standard as compared to the new one. Our first roadshows commenced last week in Victoria, where we had over 200 people in both combined in Victoria Metro and Victoria Regional regions attend these roadshows, and they were really well received. Great questions from people attending, trying to get their heads around new concepts that they're exposed to for the first time, and trying to play it out in their mind how it will work in the field. So really engaged audience, which is what we want as an industry body.
Buffer Zone Systems are the pool and spa industry specialists with a complete range of software for pool shops, service companies and commercial aquatic facilities. With more features and integrations than any other pool industry software, you really need to reach out for a one-on-one demonstration. Contact Buffer Zone today.
Yeah, it's great to see them being proactive and attending these things that you're making available for them. So this week, is there any roadshows on this week?
Yes, tomorrow we have a roadshow in Coffs Harbour. On Thursday, we have on the 17th in New South Wales in Parramatta, and on the Friday in Canberra.
Okay.
So
3 this week.
We've got 3 this week. Next week we have Adelaide and Western Australia, and towards the end of the month we will have an online version for Queensland, Northern Territory and Tasmania, simply because Queensland still operate under the 2007 standard and will continue to do so, and Tasmania and Northern Territory being small markets. The reason it's important for us to provide an online session for these groups is we have a lot of cross-border inspectors. So they might be on the border of Queensland or Northern Territory, etc., but they may work over the border. So it's important for them to have exposure to what's coming, if and when they're exposed to it when they cross that border.
And so despite it being an Australian standard, there's still differences per state.
Yeah, so we are a federation of states and territories, and as you would appreciate, everyone thinks they do it better than the next region. So we do have an Australian standards. A multitude of regions adopt the existing and current Australian standard. We have some variations in Northern Territory in particular, and Queensland, who have state-based codes and have not come up to the latest standard as yet.
Yeah. Will there be anything available for those that are sort of more remote in Victoria and New South Wales areas that haven't been able to get to a webinar? In person, I should say.
Yeah, we will open up our online webinar after our sessions in next week for 2 others who, for reasons that you've already said, that can't attend, weren't able to attend, or are too far regional to make the trip. That'll be available after the end of next week to ensure that everyone has an opportunity. And in 2025, we will be doing what we call refresher webinars to ensure that we continue to guide people right up until they are introduced. Like I said,
Fantastic.
they're published now, but they take effect from the 1st of May 2025.
Am I asking too much to ask what are the changes that
Not at all.
basically we need to be aware of?
So there are a summary of changes. The larger ones include testing of gates on where the latch is on a corner for reasons to ensure they remain closed at all times and can't shutter off. The first time ever in Australian standard, we have the guidance material to allow for shrubs, trees, and other types of foliage to be included within a non-climbable zone.
Right.
So that's exciting.
That's a big one.
It's a very big one. And, these trees the wording within the standard is supported by drawings. And the importance of us adopting it is that Queensland have been doing this for the last decade. So rather than us simply come up with our own words and images to reflect what it is that we think we want, we simply went to someone who's been doing it for a decade successfully and sought copyright for the ability and permission to use that data and that information, those words, because there's provenance.
Yeah.
And it's important. So we have new definitions. We've deleted some other ones. There are new testing requirements to assist with glass barriers and testing. We have new diagrams throughout, which are important. Better clarity, and generally a much clearer document. So it's exciting for us for industry. I would say that, being on a committee with 15 other organisations, all with competing interests, all with their own agendas, even though we're coming together with the number one objective being to keep pools safe through the use of barriers, we still come along with different experience, different lived mindsets, different agendas provided to us by our peak industry bodies. And we've got to somehow make it work. And that's why we work on a consensus basis. So there is plenty of opposition to things that I've put up, and vice versa with other organisations. Unfortunately, we don't live in a dictatorship, which is unfortunate when it comes to an Australian standard. But we've got to work with our other peers, and sometimes that means we get an imperfect outcome. But it's as close as we're going to get, because we're dealing with humans with emotion, with lived experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. And unfortunately, only, 2 weeks ago, I think there was a toddler that drowned in Bundaberg in Queensland. So the more we can do to keep our kids safe, the better.
Yes, and having said that, and I don't know the circumstances around the case that you raised, but a pool barrier standard, there's this safety utopia that we think that with a stroke of a pen, we can save every child. And it's simply not true. Okay? Accidents occur.
Yep.
And we have to acknowledge that. And we will never be able to address every single accident. Our role is to mitigate it and restrict it, but to suggest that an Australian standard or other legislative instrument will fix the problem is farcical. And we should always push for the supervision message as being our primary approach to pool water safety, especially around children.
Yeah.
Definitely supervision. Particularly, I remember when my kids were young, we watched them like a hawk. And anyone in the pool area, no phone, no any possible distraction. They had to leave the pool area. Yeah, another responsible adult, another sober responsible adult was brought in, and right, your job is lifeguard. You keep an eye on those kids. But then when they're old enough, education, teaching them to swim. I've mentioned before on this podcast, I have a lot of customers who move in from various cultures where swimming isn't the norm, isn't common in their lifestyle there. And neither the parents nor the children know how to swim. And Lee and I especially have discussed this at length. And pool barriers are a great thing, as you say, to mitigate it, but they're not the silver bullet, as it were. Yeah.
Yep, quite right. We've seen scenarios where, I've seen photo images and video images of 8 people sitting in a pool, adults, and children drowning in front of them unknowingly. And so the point comes down to, you go out to, we've got to change behavior. And that's why safety messages are important. You go and see at some of the resorts right across the country, around the world, and the first thing people do is they put a wet towel over the barrier, which restricts vision directly to the pool. You got people who are reading books. We seem to think that the children will be right because there's a barrier, but the reality is very different. I've been an advocate for innovation and change for the longest time, and I'll give you a case in point. Very few regulators in New Zealand and Australia will allow television within a pool environment.
That's fair.
Well, I don't know, is it? Because the reality is that we're all in the pool environment with our apps, our computers, our phones. And so we're concentrating on the television, but we're not keeping track of the way human behavior has evolved as has our appetite. And no regulator can stop anybody from taking in a phone, an app, which also, by the way, you can watch Netflix on, etc. So I'm not saying that these things should or should not be allowed. What I'm saying is that as a society, we seem to hang on to the thought process of yesteryear rather than looking at ways to embrace and educate and inform consumers on the here and now and future.
Very good point.
As they say, drowning is silent. And it doesn't matter whether that supervisor is reading a book or watching something on their phone or taking a phone call.
Or having a chat.
Yeah.
Or having a chat.
My mother often...
As Spiros mentioned, 8 adults in a pool and a child drowning beside them.
Yep.
Well, my mother often reminds me when I was 18 months old. In our backyard pool, we were there. There was Dad was right next to me. I believe it was one of my older brothers was on the other side of me. There were others in the pool. It's just that Mum happened to look out of the kitchen window at the right time and saw me go under, that she could run out, call, and the old boy went down, pulled me up. But literally shoulder to shoulder with 2 older people, one adult, one would have been just over 10 at the time. It's silent. It happens quickly.
Yeah.
And there is no second chance. There's no rewind button.
There's also a thing that we fall into a trap, I think, and having done the Australian standard, because as a Australian Federation of States and Standards Australia, and as a peak industry body, we have to. But I think that I lost my train of thought for a moment. Just let me collect that for a moment. Sorry.
Happens all the time on this podcast.
Looking at all the beautiful people. It'll come to me. Please continue.
Yeah. No, nothing sort of beats that parental supervision or adult supervision, and also, as we say, swimming lessons. Trying to encourage families to have their kids to swim, learning to swim, and I know my boys did from an early age. And even though I'm in the industry, people used to say to me when my boys were little, "What pool do you have, or what do you have on your pool?" And I don't have a pool. I was very adamant that until I knew that my kids could really swim extremely well, that I wasn't going to get a pool, because my youngest boy could scale a pool fence just by putting his feet between the uprights. his shoes would be that perfect width to wedge in between the 100 millimeter rails, or less, I should say, because they usually are. And he would actually jam his feet in and walk up it like it was a ladder, even though there was no horizontals. So.
What I was going to say before, and it's come back to me, is that we've got to be careful that when you think about it in its most simplistic form, a pull barrier is nothing but a fence. The moment we overcomplicate, we start to breed non-compliance because it becomes complex. The more obstacles you put in the way, the harder it is to meet a particular standard. We have a greater opportunity to allow people to forget to do all sorts of things. And it becomes so complex that all of a sudden, that even with the best intentions and genuine interest, we have certifiers that get it wrong 68% of the time. So SPASA has done a great deal of research on this, and we hear directly from industry. And on face value, whether it be a council inspector or a pool inspector or a private certifier, a secondary inspection typically will find, on 68% of the time, a secondary inspection will find that the initial or previous inspection was done incorrectly.
Wow.
Now that may be of a minor nature, but it also may be on a more complex nature. But the point is, if 68% of the people are getting it wrong consistently over a decade, it tells you that something is difficult. So if we want our industry to better understand and comply, and they're getting it wrong somewhere in the vicinity of 68% of the time, how do we expect consumers to comply when it's their obligation at law to keep their barrier compliant? If we, as an industry, and the certification industry and councils and others consistently are making minor errors here and there, how do we expect consumers to do it better or correctly?
Yeah.
So there is this real fear that by overcomplicating stuff, in other words, taking a common sense approach and making the barrier, trying to make a barrier foolproof, and introducing concepts, ideas and challenges and red tape, that we're actually over-engineering and potentially breeding non-compliance because it's so complex.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm not advocating for there to be no barrier. What I'm saying is that let's not forget what we're trying to achieve, and that is to keep children out of a swimming pool.
Yeah.
But when you look at the standard, and it's 35 odd pages and a whole range of other things, at some point we've got to say to ourselves, will the stroke of a pen continue to improve, or will the stroke of a pen alongside industry messaging, better supervision, better messaging, be a better solution, and pushing people to stay present and actively involved in their children's outdoor activities.
Well, thank you very much for your time and filling us in on what's going on. And I hope our listeners out there get along to these roadshows, and if they're not able to, that they jump onto the SPASA website and register for the webinar. Now, please, Spiros, you do this better than anybody I know. Can you please tell our listeners, if they aren't SPASA members, why they should be a SPASA member?
It's very simple for me. Every time an industry turns on a tap or a permit is issued, there's someone sitting behind it. Every time a pool is built, where water quality becomes an issue, SPASA is behind that at some point. I hear all the time, what does SPASA do for me? Well, SPASA is not in your business holding your hand. That's your job. Our job is to grow, promote and protect the industry. And by doing so, we rely on the members to support the industry that feeds them the industry that has made their life better, has given them a career to participate in making their industry better. Standards take years to develop, and if we allow others to do it for us, I'm not certain industry would like the outcome. In fact, I know they won't. So next time you ask yourself, why should I be a member? You look at the last 50 Australian standards that we've pumped out for industry, whether it's got to do with heating, fencing. We're starting water quality this year, construction. And the reality is that there's no touch point in your business, whether you're a pool service technician, with a mobile or a pool shop or a builder, fiberglass or concrete, or a supplier. There's no Australian standard. There's no regulatory authority that we haven't been involved with. Just from an advocacy point of view, aside from the fact that we have promotions in Expos magazines and we promote the industry to thousands in this country and continue to fight against and challenge and compare ourselves with the leisure industry, with the caravan industry. Promoting this industry, discretionary dollar, is difficult. Reducing red tape is hard. Now, SPASA can't remove every obstacle, but I can tell you the world is a better place in New Zealand and Australia because we exist. And for a tax deduction of a membership fee, you are participating actively in the peak industry body doing its job. And there are hundreds of opportunities for members to engage with SPASA, whether it be the direct hotline where people would speak to me about any topic whatsoever, whether it be promotions, whether it be awards, whether it be any number of things. And so I think that when people say, what does SPASA do for me? They need to look at the last 50 years and simply say, where would we be without the peak industry body fighting on our behalf? I think that's a better way of looking at it. And our members are our greatest asset. We can't do our job without them. And there are members out there who invest in this process because they believe in something. They believe in a better future. They want the industry protected, not just now, but well after I'm gone. And the reality is it's what we leave behind. We are governors of this industry. And I know I'm carrying on, but I'm very passionate about it. The SPASA are governors of this industry. We need to hand it on to the next generation to make sure that our industry continues to prosper in some way, shape or form. Many non-members out there are the direct recipients of all the hard work we do, and I would encourage them to jump on board, ask questions, attend our roadshows. They can go to the spasa.com.au website, register for the roadshows. They can call the office and speak to me or any one of our team members. But be active in the industry that feeds you, the industry that does you proud. We have qualifications in our industry. I mean, how long is this podcast? I can go on for hours.
We often do.
We refer to as pool and spa service technicians because we've got a trade qualification now. And so when I see people advertising on Seek.com for pool cleaners, I'm typically on the phone immediately, simply saying, really? Really? We're better than that, because if you think about the sort of work that pool and spa service technicians do, we undersell ourselves. You've got to stand up and stand behind who you are, who you want to be, and who you want your industry to become. And I know I'm sounding evangelical, but I walk my talk. I'm a licensed pool and spa service technician. I'm a licensed pool builder. I've done the qualifications. I would never hire me to do any of those jobs because I'm academic at best, although I've done those jobs. But there are plenty of people in our industry that have stepped up, and we need everyone else to step up. So I hope that gives you a bit of a rounded, passionate plea to those to at least consider the opportunity that presents themselves when they ask themselves, what does SPASA do for me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very well said.
And like I said, no one says it better than you do. So thank you for sharing that with us. And you said that Australia and New Zealand community society is better off for SPASA being around. And I can tell you that SPASA and our industry are better off for you being such a wonderful, passionate part of it. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. I appreciate the time you guys have given me, Peter, Shane, and Lee.
No, thank you.
Listeners, thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Just to recap there, to check out SPASA, it's spasa.com.au, that's spasa.com.au. And to find the roadshow and other events, spasa.com.au/events. Clear, simple, I like it.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
All righty.
Thanks very much.
Spiros.
Thank you all.
See you guys.
Thank you.